The Daesing Alliance detected Earth through their advanced scanners that could see across vast distances of space. This coalition of 7 different alien species had conquered many worlds across 3 galaxies during their long history. They were powerful beyond human imagination, with technology that made Earth's greatest achievements look like primitive tools. Commander Kim stood on the bridge of his massive flagship, looking at the holographic display of Earth rotating slowly before him. His tall, slender frame cast a long shadow as he circled the projection, studying the blue planet with calculating eyes. "So this is our next acquisition," he said, his voice cool and measured. "Looks unremarkable." Behind him, junior officers managed the ship's systems with quiet efficiency. The command center hummed with subtle energy as information flowed constantly between ships in the enormous fleet. 5,000 warships waited in formation, each one capable of destroying entire cities with a single weapon discharge. "The inhabitants call themselves humans," reported Officer Jun, looking up from his data terminal. "Class 3 civilization, just beginning to explore their own solar system. Primitive nuclear weapons, no unified planetary government, limited understanding of quantum physics." Commander Kim nodded. This was routine. The Daesing Alliance had incorporated dozens of similar worlds into their domain. Standard procedure was straightforward. Demonstrate overwhelming force, eliminate any organized military resistance, establish resource extraction operations, and integrate the surviving population as a worker class. Most species surrendered after the first major cities were destroyed. "Preparations for Operation Earthfall are on schedule, Commander," said Captain Han, Kim's second-in-command. "The fleet will be ready for atmospheric entry in 72 hours. "Good," Kim replied. "Make sure the resource assessment teams are prepared to deploy immediately after the initial pacification phase." Across the ship in the Data Analysis Center, Park frowned at her screen. As the fleet's lead behavior analyst, she had been studying Earth's communications, history, and cultural signals for weeks. Something about the patterns troubled her. "You look concerned," said Technician Joe, noticing Park's expression as he delivered updated reports to her station. Park gestured to her screens. "These humans, they don't fit our prediction models properly." "In what way?" Joe asked, looking at the complicated graphs and data flows that meant little to him. "Their history is filled with constant warfare among themselves. They'd been killing each other over territory, resources, beliefs, even slight differences in appearance for their entire recorded history," Park explained. "But when faced with common threats, natural disasters, diseases, climate shifts, they show remarkable capacity for cooperation." She pulled up examples: international aid efforts after earthquakes, global scientific collaboration during pandemics, joint space missions between former enemy nations. "It's contradictory behavior," Park continued. "Most species we encounter are either naturally cooperative or naturally aggressive. These humans switch between extremes depending on context." Joe shrugged. "Perhaps, but they're still just a Class 3 civilization. Their most advanced weapons can barely reach their own moon." Park wasn't convinced. "I've also noticed something unusual in their entertainment transmissions. They seem obsessed with the idea of extraterrestrial contact, and in most of their fictional scenarios, they ultimately prevail against invaders, even when technologically outmatched." "Fiction is not reality," Joe replied with a dismissive gesture. "When they see our ships darkening their skies, their primitive weapons failing against our shields, they will react as all others do, with fear and submission." Park nodded reluctantly, but made a notation to forward her concerns to command. It was probably nothing, but her job was thorough analysis, not assumption. Later that day, Commander Kim called a meeting with his senior staff to review final invasion plans. They gathered around a large tactical table displaying Earth's continents and major cities. "Initial strike targets have been identified," stated military strategist Sung, highlighting several areas on the map. "We'll begin with demonstrations of force over their most populated areas. These cities, called New York, Beijing, London, Moscow, and Delhi. Our presence alone should trigger their survival instinct and bring their leaders to negotiations. Science Officer Lee nodded in agreement. Based on their communication patterns, they appear to have no unified response protocol for extraterrestrial contact. Their military forces are divided by national boundaries. This fragmentation will work to our advantage. What about their nuclear weapons? Asked Captain Han. Desperate species sometimes choose self-destruction. Their nuclear capability is primitive and limited, Lee replied confidently. Our ships can neutralize any launches before they reach deployment altitude, and our psychological profile suggests they value survival enough to avoid planetary suicide. Commander Kim reviewed the tactical assessments with satisfaction. Everything appeared straightforward. A standard conquest operation against a technologically inferior species. The Daesang Alliance had performed this procedure countless times across 3 galaxies. And the resource assessment? Kim asked, turning to Economic Officer Min. Min displayed a new set of charts. Extremely favorable, Commander. This planet has abundant water, minerals, and biological diversity. Particularly valuable are certain rare elements concentrated in their crust. The planet will significantly boost Alliance resources once harvesting begins. Kim nodded, pleased with the thoroughness of the reports. Very well. Maintain invasion schedule. We enter Earth orbit in 68 hours. Begin atmospheric descent 3 hours later. As the meeting dispersed, Science Officer Lee approached Park, who had been quietly observing from a side station. I noticed your behavioral analysis included several cautionary notes, Lee said. Something troubles you about these humans. Park hesitated before responding. Just some anomalies in their psychological patterns, sir. They don't respond to threats in predictable ways according to our models, and they show unusual adaptability. Lee smiled slightly. All species have their quirks, Analyst Park, but technology determines outcomes, not quirks of behavior. Our energy weapons against their explosive projectiles, our quantum shields against their nuclear warheads, our unified fleet against their divided forces. The variables that matter are decidedly in our favor. Of course, sir, Park replied respectfully. I just thought the observations worth noting. Noted, then, Lee said with finality. But unnecessary. They're an unusual species, certainly interesting to study. But nothing special. Nothing we haven't handled before. As Park returned to her station, she couldn't shake a feeling of unease. The human entertainment transmission she had analyzed contained countless scenarios of alien invasions. In most, the humans found unexpected ways to prevail despite overwhelming odds. It was just fiction, of course. Stories they told themselves. But why did a species tell itself the same story so many times? Was it mere entertainment, or something deeper, a kind of psychological preparation? On the bridge, Commander Kim issued final preparation orders. Operation Earthfall would commence in 72 hours. The Daesang Alliance would add another world to its vast domain, another species to its hierarchy of controlled populations, another set of resources to fuel its expansion. None of them could have predicted what awaited them. The massive Daesang warships broke through Earth's cloud cover at precisely 800 hours global coordinated time. They appeared simultaneously over New York, Beijing, London, Moscow, and Delhi. Enormous dark shapes that blotted out the sun and cast city-sized shadows below. Each vessel measured nearly 3 kilometers in length, their hulls gleaming with an otherworldly metal that shifted colors like oil on water. Panic erupted immediately. Streets filled with terrified people pointing skyward. Vehicle traffic jammed as drivers abandoned cars to stare at the impossible shapes hovering overhead. Emergency sirens wailed across every continent. In the White House Situation Room, the American president watched live footage with military leaders. What options do we have? She asked, voice steady despite the circumstances. We've scrambled fighter jets, Madam President, the Air Force General replied. Missiles are armed and ready for your command. Similar scenes played out in government centers worldwide. Within 20 minutes of the ship's arrival, Military aircraft approached the alien vessels. F-35s, J-20s, Sukhoi, and Rafales circled the enormous ships, pilots reporting back with voices tight with tension. No visible weapon systems, no response to communication attempts, holding position approximately 2,000 feet above city center. The order came simultaneously from multiple world leaders. Engage with warning shots. Missiles streaked toward the alien ships. The projectiles never reached their targets. Each detonated harmlessly against invisible barriers surrounding the vessels, flaring into spectacular but ineffective light shows. Cannon fire likewise dissipated against the shields. Aboard his command ship over New York, Commander Kim watched the primitive defense attempts with mild amusement. "Their weapons are even less effective than predicted," he remarked to Captain Han. "They waste resources on these displays." "Should we respond with a demonstration, Commander?" Han asked. Kim considered briefly. "No. Let them exhaust their initial resistance. Prepare the global communication override." Technicians worked quickly, hacking into Earth's broadcast systems with technology centuries beyond human capability. Within minutes, every electronic device on the planet, televisions, radios, phones, computers, displayed or broadcast the same message. Commander Kim stood before a plain background, his tall figure and distinctly non-human features causing collective gasps worldwide. His skin had a subtle blue undertone, eyes larger than human proportion, with no visible hair. When he spoke, his mouth movements didn't quite match the translated words. "People of Earth," his voice came through in each region's dominant language. "I am Commander Kim of the Daesang Alliance. Your planet is now under our authority. Your resources belong to the Alliance. Your continued existence depends on your cooperation. Resistance is pointless against our technology. Surrender your military forces. Direct your leaders to contact us using the frequency now being transmitted to your communication centers, and prepare to accept status as a protectorate species. Those who cooperate will be permitted to live productive lives under Alliance guidance. Those who resist will be eliminated." The transmission ended abruptly. Kim turned to his officers. "Deploy the landing parties as planned. Begin resource surveys immediately." Throughout the day, smaller craft descended from the main ships. They landed in central locations: Central Park in New York, Hyde Park in London, the Temple of Heaven in Beijing. Daesang soldiers emerged, tall figures in sleek armor carrying weapons unlike anything humans had seen before. The expected mass surrender did not occur. Instead, something entirely different happened. Within hours of the landings, reports reached Commander Kim of unexpected resistance. In New York, snipers targeted Daesang survey teams from distant buildings. In London, improvised explosive devices detonated near landing craft. In Moscow, a group of civilians driving construction equipment rammed a scout vessel. "These are not military responses," Lieutenant Choi reported with confusion. "Civilians are attacking our forces using improvised weapons and tactics." Kim frowned. "Increase security around the survey teams. Use non-lethal deterrents for now." By nightfall, the situation had deteriorated further. Daesang communications experienced unexpected interference. Human military forces, rather than attempting large-scale assaults, had broken into small units conducting hit-and-run attacks against alien positions. In the Beijing sector, a Daesang technology assessment team found their equipment disabled by a crude but effective electromagnetic pulse device. In Delhi, landing parties reported their sensor systems malfunctioning due to some kind of localized jamming. "How are they adapting so quickly?" Captain Han demanded during the emergency briefing. "Their technology is primitive." Science Officer Lee reviewed incoming data with growing concern. "They're using our own technology against us." The team attacked in Moscow reported humans salvaging components from damaged equipment. "They're reverse engineering our devices within hours." Commander Kim's expression darkened. "Deploy the communication jammers. Isolate their resistance cells from each other." The Daesang activated powerful disruption fields designed to block all human communication technology. For 30 minutes, Earth's networks went silent. Then, inexplicably, signals began breaking through again. "They're using old technology," Lieutenant Choi reported with disbelief. "Radio equipment from their mid-20th century. Mechanical systems with no digital components. Our jammers were designed for quantum communication networks, not these antiques." More disturbing reports arrived hourly. Human military forces had quickly identified vulnerabilities in Daesang personal shields. They didn't extend fully to the ground, allowing for attacks from below. The humans had observed that certain sound frequencies disrupted Daesang's sensor systems. They were adapting with remarkable speed. On the third day, Commander Kim called an emergency meeting with his senior staff. "This resistance is unacceptable," he stated flatly. "We need to understand why our intelligence was so flawed." Lieutenant Choi, who had been analyzing captured human communication devices, spoke up hesitantly. "Sir, I've discovered something unusual. They're entertainment media, these movies and television shows. They're full of scenarios exactly like this one." "Explain," Kim demanded. "For over a century, humans have been creating stories about alien invasions. In these scenarios, they practice different resistance methods, explore potential alien weaknesses, and imagine how to defeat technologically superior forces." Cho displayed examples on the briefing screen, scenes from Independence Day, War of the Worlds, Falling Skies, and dozens more. "They'd been mentally rehearsing this exact scenario," Choi continued, "not as military training, but as entertainment. Billions of humans have been exposed to these ideas. When we arrived, they already had conceptual frameworks for resistance." The command room fell silent as the implications sank in. "They've been waiting for us," Lieutenant Choi said uneasily, "as if they've rehearsed this scenario. Not with actual drills, but in their collective imagination." Commander Kim stared at the tactical display showing the spreading resistance. This was not how invasions were supposed to proceed. Standard conquest protocols were failing. The humans weren't behaving like any species the Daesang had encountered before. "Increase force levels," Kim ordered finally. "Move to Phase 2 elimination of military assets. We need to demonstrate consequences." As his officers hurried to comply, Kim remained staring at the display. Something about this planet and its defenders felt different. The humans weren't just fighting back. They almost seemed prepared for this moment, as if some part of them had been expecting visitors from the stars all along. And not just expecting them, but expecting to win. Commander Kim paced the length of the tactical chamber, his tall figure casting a long shadow across the holographic map of Earth. Red markers indicating resistance hotspots had multiplied overnight. What had begun as scattered opposition now showed alarming coordination. The Daesang advance had completely stalled. "This is unprecedented," he said to the assembled officers. 7 days into the operation, and we haven't secured even one major population center." Captain Han gestured to the display. "Their military forces should have collapsed by now. Instead, they're adapting to our technology at an alarming rate." The evidence was undeniable. When the Daesang deployed sonic disruptors designed to incapacitate human nervous systems, they expected mass surrenders. Instead, within hours, human soldiers appeared wearing simple earplugs and noise-canceling headphones. Some units even repurposed old-fashioned mechanical communication systems that weren't affected by the sonic weapons. "Their adaptation speed defies all models," Science Officer Lee admitted. "Yesterday, we released mind control nanites in the water supply of this city called Chicago. Our projections indicated 70% population compliance within 12 hours. "And the result?" Kim asked, though he already knew the answer. "Their scientists identified the nanites within 3 hours. Within 6, they had developed a simple electromagnetic pulse device that deactivates the nanites. They distributed the plans online, and citizens began building countermeasures from household electronics." Lee's voice held poorly concealed disbelief. "They're using modified microwave ovens as defense weapons." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Daesang had conquered 17 civilizations across 3 galaxies. some with technology far more advanced than Earth's. None had resisted so effectively. Intelligence Officer Kang entered the chamber, her usual composed demeanor visibly shaken. She carried a data tablet containing her latest analysis. "Commander, I've completed my assessment of human cultural transmissions, and I believe I've identified why our invasion has stalled," she said. Kim nodded for her to continue. "Sir, they've been creating fictional scenarios of alien invasions for centuries," Kang explained, displaying examples on the main screen. "Their entertainment, literature, games, all filled with variations of our exact attack. They call it science fiction. It's not just entertainment. It's a form of mental preparation that has trained their entire population to respond to us." The screen filled with images, old black and white films showing flying saucers, more modern depictions of alien warriors, computer games where players defended Earth from extraterrestrial threats. "They've been imagining us before we ever arrived," Kang continued. "And in these scenarios, they almost always win. They've collectively rehearsed countless defense strategies." "Entertainment is not military training," Captain Han objected. "For most species, no," Kang agreed. "But humans appear unique. They internalize these narratives. Look at this." She showed footage captured by scout drones. Children in a park played a game called Aliens vs. Humans, using sticks as weapons and triumphantly defeating the child playing the alien. In another clip, a human teenager explained to friends how he would fight back in an invasion, his plans eerily similar to actual resistance tactics now being employed. "They're young trained for this scenario through play," Kang said. "Their adults consume media that reinforces the belief that they can defeat technologically superior invaders. They've been psychologically preparing for generations." Commander Kim reviewed the evidence with growing concern. "Show me more examples of their science fiction." The screen displayed scenes from human entertainment. Aliens defeated by water in something called Signs, invaders succumbing to Earth bacteria in War of the Worlds, humans discovering critical weaknesses in alien technology in Independence Day, and dozens more examples. "They've imagined virtually every way we might attack," Kang explained, "and devised counters for each." "This doesn't explain their technical adaptation," Lee objected. "But it does," Kang insisted. "Their scientists and engineers grew up consuming these scenarios. When we arrived, they didn't panic. They recognized us from their stories. They already had theoretical frameworks for how our technology might work." The implications were profound. The Daeseng had encountered an enemy who had spent generations preparing for them, not through actual experience, but through imagination, a form of preparation the Alliance had never considered. Kim turned away from the display, his mind racing. "What about our biological weapons? The pathogen release was scheduled for this morning." Medical Officer Jin appeared uncomfortable. "Sir, we've canceled the deployment. Our surveillance indicates human scientists already developing countermeasures before we've even released it." "That's impossible," Captain Han exclaimed. "They found one of our scout ships that crashed near their city called Denver," Jin explained. "They recovered biological samples and identified our weapons. They're already synthesizing vaccines." "How?" Lee demanded. "Their genetic technology is primitive." It was, Jin corrected. "But they're advancing at an exponential rate, using our own technology as a blueprint. They're making leaps that should take decades in mere days." Commander Kim moved to the window overlooking Earth below. The blue planet rotated peacefully, giving no outward sign of the fierce resistance happening on its surface. "Show me their global response," he ordered. The tactical display shifted to show communication patterns across Earth. What had begun as isolated resistance cells had transformed into a coordinated global effort. Former enemy nations shared intelligence and resources. Scientists worldwide collaborated openly, publishing discoveries immediately for others to build upon. "They've unified," Kang observed. "Our invasion has done what nothing in their history could accomplish. It has united their entire species." Kim studied footage of human civilians converting factories to produce needed supplies, of children delivering messages between resistance groups, of elderly humans teaching younger ones techniques from past wars. Their adaptability extends beyond technology, he noted. Their social structures are transforming to meet the threat. The command chamber grew quiet as the senior officers contemplated their situation. The invasion force, originally planned for a 7-day operation, now faced unexpected challenges with no clear path to victory. "Commander," Captain Han finally spoke, "perhaps we should consider a strategic withdrawal to reassess." Kim didn't respond immediately. In his long career, he had never retreated, never failed to secure a target world. The thought was almost inconceivable. How do you defeat an enemy, he wondered aloud, who has already envisioned their victory countless times, who has rehearsed this exact scenario through generations of stories and games? He turned to face his officers. No withdrawal. Not yet. Deploy the ground forces in Sector 7. Let's see how they respond to direct confrontation. As his officers hurried to comply, Kim remained alone in the tactical chamber, studying the images of human resistance. In one, a small child looked up at a Daesang scout ship with not fear, but determination, as if this moment had been expected, prepared for, perhaps even welcomed as the fulfillment of an ancient story. For the first time in his military career, Commander Kim felt a sensation alien to his experience: doubt. Commander Kim stood rigidly before the emergency council, the holographic displays around him flashing with red warning signals. 10 days into what should have been a simple conquest operation, and the situation had become a nightmare. His face, normally composed, showed the strain of consecutive sleepless cycles. The virus attack began at 300 hours, he reported to the grim-faced officers. It somehow penetrated our quantum firewalls and spread through the command network before we could isolate it. Security Officer Song stepped forward, her uniform disheveled from hours of crisis management. The humans call it Trojan horse. It appears they studied the communication protocols from our damaged scout vessels and found a backdoor entry point we didn't know existed. The tactical display showed the devastating results. 300 Daesang warships hung dead in orbit, their navigation systems completely disabled. Some had drifted into dangerous proximity with others, causing collisions that damaged another 50 vessels. How did a primitive species bypass our security so completely? Captain Han demanded, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. They didn't create the virus alone, Song admitted reluctantly. They captured Technician Yun during a ground mission 3 days ago. Under interrogation, he revealed critical details about our systems. The room fell silent. The idea that a Daesang officer would break under human questioning was almost unthinkable. What methods did they use? Commander Kim asked quietly. Song looked uncomfortable. That's the disturbing part, sir. They didn't use physical torture. According to the data we recovered, they simply asked him questions. For hours. They were nice to him. Nice. Captain Han scoffed. They provided food, treated his injuries, showed pictures of their families, explained why they were fighting. Song continued. They appealed to his empathy. Our psychological profiles didn't predict this approach. Before anyone could respond, the chamber shook violently. Alarm signals blared. We're under attack, Communications Officer Jun announced, rushing to his station. Human aircraft approaching from multiple vectors. They're using our own weapon systems against us. The external cameras showed the impossible. Human fighter jets, crewed by Daesang standards, now carried energy weapons clearly salvaged and modified from downed alien craft. They fired with precision at the disabled ships, targeting engine compartments and weapon bays. How are they flying through our defense grid? Kim demanded. They've replicated our shield frequencies, Officer Jun replied, disbelief in his voice. They're broadcasting Daesang identification signals. Our automated defenses recognize them as friendly craft. Commander Kim watched in stunned silence as the humans executed a perfectly coordinated attack run. Their piloting skills were remarkable, using Earth's atmosphere and gravity in ways the Daezang, accustomed to deep space warfare, had not anticipated. Science Officer Lee entered the chamber, carrying a data tablet with his latest analysis. His usually neat appearance had given way to disheveled clothing and bloodshot eyes. "Commander, I've completed my assessment of human technological adaptation," he announced without preamble. "The results are concerning." "Speak plainly," Kim ordered. "In 10 days, they've advanced approximately 70 years beyond their previous technological level," Lee stated. "They're not just copying our technology. They're understanding, improving, and integrating it with their own systems in ways we never considered." He displayed images of human engineers working with salvaged Daezang components. In one, they had combined a quantum power cell with primitive solar panels to create a hybrid energy system more efficient than either technology alone. "This species doesn't just adapt," Officer Lee concluded grimly. "They thrive under pressure. The invasion has triggered an explosion of innovation, unlike anything we've documented before." Intelligence Officer Kang joined the briefing, adding her own troubling report. "We've identified another factor in their resistance. Unlike the 17 other species we've conquered, humans fight more aggressively when cornered." She displayed population response charts. Most species show diminishing resistance as casualties increase. Humans show the opposite pattern. Each successful attack against them strengthens their resolve. They call it defiance. Their historical records are filled with examples, smaller forces defeating larger ones through sheer determination. The chamber shook again as another wave of human attackers struck the fleet. "Casualties?" Kim asked. "8 ships destroyed, 22 heavily damaged," Captain Han reported. "We've lost contact with all ground forces in the region they call North America. The humans are jamming our communications using modified versions of our own technology." Commander Kim studied the tactical display, watching as human resistance spread across the planet. Red indicators of Daezang losses multiplied while green markers showing secured territories vanished one by one. "The landing zone in their Europe region has been overrun," Security Officer Song reported. "The humans are capturing our technology intact. They've developed electromagnetic pulse weapons that disable our systems without destroying components." "Clever," Lee muttered. "They want our technology functional." Commander Kim faced the hardest decision of his career. The invasion force, originally consisting of 5,000 ships, had lost nearly a fifth of its strength. Supply lines stretched thin across space. The operations resource budget, calculated for a short campaign, was nearly depleted. "What are our options?" he asked finally. Captain Han spoke first. "We can escalate to planetary bombardment. Our remaining ships carry enough firepower to render large portions of the surface uninhabitable and destroy the resources we came to claim," Kim noted. "We could target limited population centers," Han suggested, "break their will to resist." Intelligence Officer Kang shook her head. "Based on their response patterns, that would likely strengthen their resolve. Their media is full of scenarios where they rebuild from catastrophic destruction and ultimately prevail." "Withdrawal, then," Medical Officer Jin suggested quietly. "Regroup, reassess, return with better intelligence and adapted strategies." The suggestion hung in the air. The Daesang Alliance had never retreated from a conquest in its 10,000-year history. Commander Kim moved to the viewport, gazing down at Earth. A beautiful world, deceptively peaceful from orbit. Its inhabitants had appeared primitive, technologically inferior, an easy target. Now his mighty fleet lay damaged and vulnerable, while the humans grew stronger each day. "They're not just defending their world," he said softly. "They're learning from us, evolving, if we remain." He left the thought unfinished, but everyone understood. If the Daesang remained, they might not only fail to conquer Earth, they might provide humans with enough technology to become a threat beyond their own world. "Prepare contingency plans for strategic withdrawal," Kim ordered finally. But continue defensive operations. I want a full assessment of our remaining capabilities within 6 hours. As his officers hurried to comply, Commander Kim remained at the viewport, watching human ships dart between his damaged vessels like predators sensing weakness. The anticipated quick victory had become a war of attrition against an opponent growing stronger daily, and for the first time the outcome seemed uncertain. Commander Kim stood alone in his private chamber, reviewing the final battle statistics. The numbers told a story of unprecedented failure. In 30 days, the once mighty Daesang invasion force had lost 1/3 of its ships. Over 20,000 crew members were dead or missing. The resource expenditure had exceeded the projected conquest budget by 700%. Outside his viewport, the remnants of his fleet prepared for faster-than-light departure. Emergency repairs had restored basic functionality to damaged vessels, but many would require extensive reconstruction upon returning to Daesang space. A soft chime announced Captain Han's arrival. The captain's face showed the strain of recent weeks, deep lines around his eyes, a slight hollowness to his cheeks. "All ships report ready for retreat, Commander," Han said, his voice carefully neutral. Both officers avoided using the word defeat. Kim nodded slowly. "Initiate final withdrawal sequence. Coordinate jumps by battle group to avoid detection of our drive signatures." "And the remaining ground forces?" Han asked. "We've lost contact with 80% of them," Kim replied. "We can't risk further landing operations to retrieve them. They are considered sacrificed." The word hung heavy between them. Daesang military doctrine had no protocols for abandoning personnel. It had never been necessary before. "Understood, Commander." Han hesitated, then added, "The Council has requested your immediate report upon jump completion." They are displeased with the operation's outcome. Kim had expected this. The Daesang Alliance Council, ruling body of 7 species across 3 galaxies, had never experienced conquest failure. They would demand explanations, assign blame, seek scapegoats. "I will provide a full accounting," Kim said simply. As Han departed, Kim returned to the tactical display. The blue-green world rotated below, deceptively peaceful. In the 30 days since their arrival, humans had not only resisted successfully, but had begun to harness Daesang technology in ways that defied all prediction models. His communication panel activated, displaying Science Officer Lee's face. "Commander, you should see this immediately," Lee said, his expression troubled. "Proceed." Lee transmitted data to Kim's display. "Our long-range sensors have detected unusual activity at the human space facility they call International Space Station. They're testing a prototype drive system using components salvaged from our disabled vessels." Kim examined the readings with growing concern. "Already, our drive technology requires quantum engineering principles centuries beyond their previous capability." "That's not all," Lee continued. "We've intercepted communications indicating 17 separate research teams are working on variations of our faster-than-light technology. Their scientists are sharing discoveries openly, building on each other's work in real time." "Timeline to functional prototype?" Kim asked. Lee's expression grew more troubled. "Based on their current rate of advancement, 5 years, possibly less." Kim absorbed this information silently. 5 years from planetary defense to interstellar capability would represent the fastest technological leap of any known species in galactic history. The withdrawal must proceed immediately, he decided. Alert all ships to accelerate departure schedules. 3 hours later, the last Daesang vessel activated its jump drive, vanishing from Earth orbit in a flash of displaced spacetime. Behind them, they left a changed world, a planet united by common defense, rapidly incorporating alien technology and looking to the stars with new purpose. 6 weeks after the retreat, Commander Kim stood before the Alliance Council in the Great Chamber on Daesang Prime. 7 representatives from the Alliance species sat in elevated positions, looking down at him with expressions ranging from disbelief to controlled fury. Explain how the most powerful invasion fleet in Alliance history was driven from a Class 3 world by primitives, demanded Counselor Ta, representative of the founding Dazang species. Kim stood straight, his voice steady. Earth cannot be conquered through conventional means. Humanity represents a unique threat, a species that imagines its worst fears, then prepares for them through cultural rehearsal. He activated the chamber's display system, showing examples of human science fiction. Their stories of alien contact, invasion, and resistance spanning centuries. While we studied their weapons and defenses, we should have studied their imagination, Kim continued. Through entertainment and speculation, they rehearsed our invasion countless times before we arrived. They were psychologically prepared in ways no other species has been. Counselor Munn leaned forward. You speak of stories, fiction. This is your explanation for failure. These stories shaped their response, Kim insisted. When we arrived, they recognized us from their collective imagination. They had already considered and rejected surrender as an option. Their fiction had taught them that resistance was not only possible but inevitable. He displayed more data, humans adapting Dazang technology, reverse engineering weapons, developing countermeasures at unprecedented speed. Most concerning is their rate of advancement, Kim explained. The assessment from Science Division is troubling. Humans are developing interstellar capabilities using our abandoned technology. Conservative estimates suggest they will achieve faster-than-light travel within 5 years. The council chamber erupted in alarmed conversations. Interstellar capability within 5 years of first contact was unprecedented. Most species required centuries after discovering alien life to develop such technology. You've failed not only the conquest mission, Counselor Ta said coldly, but potentially endangered the Alliance itself. If these humans are as adaptable and aggressive as your report suggests, you've created a new threat to our dominion. Kim nodded grimly. That is my assessment as well. We didn't just fail to conquer Earth. We've created a new galactic power, one forged in the crucible of our invasion. They now possess our technology, understand our tactics, and have confidence in their ability to defeat us. What would you have us do? Asked Counselor Jin, her voice cutting through the chamber's tension. Return with a larger force. Preemptive strike. No, Kim said firmly. Further aggression would be disastrous. My final recommendation is that Earth be reclassified immediately, not as a conquest target, but as a potential ally. Any other approach would be hopeless. Silence fell across the chamber. In the 10,000-year history of the Dazang Alliance, no commander had ever suggested alliance with a target world. Conquest was the only recognized approach to expansion. Elaborate. Counselor Jin ordered. Humans possess qualities valuable to the Alliance, Kim explained. Their adaptability exceeds anything in our experience. Their creativity allows cognitive leaps our own scientists rarely achieve. Most importantly, they unify against external threats while maintaining internal diversity of thought, a combination that drives innovation. He displayed final images captured before retreat. Humans cooperating across former enemy lines, repurposing Dazang technology in novel ways, celebrating small victories with remarkable spirit. I believe they will reach the stars with or without our assistance, Kim concluded. The choice before us is whether they arrive as enemies remembering our invasion, or as potential allies invited to join a greater community. 6 months later, Commander Kim stood on the observation deck of a diplomatic vessel approaching Earth orbit. The ship was unarmed, its design clearly distinguished from the previous invasion fleet. After heated debate, the Alliance Council had narrowly approved his unprecedented recommendation. Below, Earth had changed visibly. Orbital platforms incorporating Dazang technology now circled the planet. Primitive but functional defensive systems tracked the approaching ship. Most remarkably, a prototype vessel with unmistakable faster-than-light drive components was under construction in high orbit, 4 years ahead of even Kim's accelerated estimates. They're hailing us, reported Communications Officer Jun. Open channel, Kim ordered. The view screen activated, showing the human face, a woman with determined eyes, and the insignia of the newly formed United Earth Defense Force. Daesang vessel, this is Admiral Chen of Earth. State your purpose in returning to our system. Kim stepped forward. Admiral Chen, I am Commander Kim of the Daesang Alliance. I come under diplomatic authorization with a message from our council. He paused, the weight of the moment not lost on him. In all of galactic history, few events would prove as consequential as this conversation. We recognize Earth as a sovereign world and humanity as a pure species. Kim continued, reciting the carefully negotiated words. The Daesang Alliance extends an invitation not of conquest, but of cooperation. On the screen, Admiral Chen's expression remained cautious but curious. Behind her, other humans gathered, watching this historic moment unfold. We're listening, Commander, she replied. As the diplomatic exchange began, Kim reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought them here. The Daesang had arrived as conquerors and retreated in defeat. Now they returned as supplicants, seeking alliance with a species that had done the impossible. Earth would never again be a target for conquest. Humanity had earned something far rarer in the cosmos than victory in battle. They had earned respect.